Hey, this is Mr. W. Welcome to episode 1 of Thinking Biologically, Biology's Big Ideas. This is the first episode of a weekly series that I'll be doing this year. My goal is to help you succeed in your biology course and learn more than you ever thought imaginable. Throughout this series, I'll be emphasizing the College Board's 4 big ideas. Why? Because they're a fantastic intellectual scaffold that you can use to organize all of the information in this very information-rich subject. Here's what they are: evolution, information storage and transmission, energy and matter flow, and systems and system interactions. And they're all right here in this apple. Evolution is the process by which living things change over time. This apple is a gala or a gala, depending on how you like to pronounce it. It's a cultivated variety of a wild, undomesticated apple that first evolved in Central Asia. If you could go back in time and went back just 100 years, you wouldn't find a gala apple. This variety has only been cultivated for about 100 years. It's one of hundreds of apple varieties, each with different appearances and tastes that humans have created through selective breeding. Evolution is a process that unfolds over time. You can use a diagram like this, it's called a phylogenetic tree, to represent the evolutionary history of any organism, including apples. Apples have a common, relatively recent ancestor with crab apples. They're more distantly related to fruit-like pears. Apples, crab apples, and pears are part of an enormous group of species called the flowering plants that first emerged over 100 million years ago in the time of the dinosaurs. A more ancient ancestor gave rise to plants with seeds, but no flowers, about 350 million years ago. You can push further back to seedless plants, and eventually you reach an ancestor that wasn't a plant at all. Before 450 million years ago, there was no life on land. There were no plants. At that point, the apple's ancestor was some kind of aquatic photosynthetic algae. If you go wide enough, you're looking at all of evolutionary history, essentially the tree of life. Here's the group that apples belong to, the plant kingdom. Here's our group, the animals. Note that we and apples have an evolutionary ancestor in common. The apple is our evolutionary cousin, as is every other living thing. Is there evidence for that astounding claim? Of course, it's embedded in our genes, our cells, our metabolism. We'll get there later in this series. Evolution produces adaptations, structures with functions that help organisms to survive and to reproduce. The skin of this apple is an adaptation that evolved to attract animals by letting the apple be seen against a sea of green leaves. That's a trait that co-evolved with color vision in fruit-loving primates like ourselves. The apple's skin also protects the apple's flesh from bacteria and fungi. The flesh is an adaptation that evolved to be a reward for animals that would eat the fruit and swallow the seeds. The seeds themselves have other adaptations, including a protective seed coat that allows the seeds to pass through an animal's gut without being broken down by the acids in an animal's stomach. This allows the seeds to be deposited somewhere where they can grow into new apple trees. Adaptations come about through a process called natural selection. In any population, there's variation in traits. Among the apple seeds, there are going to be some that have thicker coats and some that have thinner coats. Some of that variation is determined by genes, variants that are unsuccessful, which means that they're not very good at promoting survival and reproduction, are going to wind up being removed from the population. An apple seed that has a coat that's too thin is going to wind up being dissolved in the stomach. As it's being dissolved, the genes for that trait are also going to be dissolved. And that means that those genes won't wind up being represented in the next generation's gene pool. The opposite is going to happen to traits that are more adaptive, that help an organism to survive and reproduce. So over time, natural selection shapes adaptations. It's that simple. The second big idea in our course is information storage and transmission. Again, think about this apple. You plant an apple seed, you get a new plant. What the seed is transmitting is information about how to build a new tree. That information is genetic information, and it's stored in a molecule called DNA. Let's think about DNA in the context of a cell. DNA is in the cell's nucleus, and it sends a message that goes to particles that are called ribosomes. Those ribosomes are unbelievable because what they can do is they can take information sent by DNA and translate it into protein. Protein determines the characteristics of cells, and in fact, through many complex mechanisms, proteins will wind up determining the characteristics of the entire organism. And that information has been changing over evolutionary time. In fact, you can think of evolution as a change in the genetic information carried within a population's gene pool. The third theme is energy and matter flow. This apple was built by cells using solar energy. Photosynthesis is one of the great energy reactions in living things. What photosynthetic cells can do is take free energy in sunlight. Free energy is available energy that can be harvested to do work. And they use that energy to combine carbon dioxide, a gas in the air, and water to create carbohydrates. Those carbohydrates are full of chemical energy that plants can use to power their own life processes. These carbohydrates also provide the matter, the carbon, hydrogen, the oxygen atoms that plants use to build themselves. Now that energy can also pass to animals like you and me. What we do is we take chemical energy, combine it with oxygen, release the energy we need to sustain our life processes. We breathe out the exhaust, carbon dioxide and water vapor. The entire process is called cellular respiration, and it's life's other great energy-related process. So we have energy flow from the sun into plants and then into animals like you and me. Note that this is a one-way flow. The energy isn't lost, but it starts out as useful free energy, and by the time living things are done with it, it's useless heat. Energy flows and dissipates. In almost every ecosystem on Earth, life is sustained by a constant flow of energy from the sun. Matter works differently. It's recycled. Carbon, for example, will move from carbon dioxide in the air into plants, like apple trees. Plants, in addition to doing photosynthesis, also do cellular respiration, and that returns some carbon dioxide into the air. The carbohydrates made by plants can then pass to animals. We perform cellular respiration, and that again returns CO2 to the air. When living things die, they're decomposed by bacteria and fungi. Decomposition returns carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So the same atoms have been cycling on planet Earth for billions of years. Idea number 4 is that life is composed of complex interacting systems. A system is a group of connected things that form a larger whole. You know that phrase, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts? That's what systems are all about. The systems that we'll look at most in this course are cells, the building blocks of life. Earlier, we looked at the tree of life. You can see here that the tree has a common stem, and then there are 3 major branches. Each branch is a domain. That's the biggest classification category, and it's based on cell type. Simpler, smaller cells are found in bacteria and archaea. Much more complex cells, like the one in this paramecium, are found in our domain, the eukaryotes. Apple trees are composed of eukaryotic cells that are like this. These cells interconnect to form tissues, like the photosynthetic tissue in this leaf. Interacting tissues form organs, like the leaf itself. At every level, new properties emerge as the system grows more complex. Organisms, whether they're made of one cell like this paramecium or trillions of cells like you and me, are open systems. That means that they have inputs and outputs. The inputs, in terms of cellular respiration, are things like fuel, food, and oxygen. The outputs are things like carbon dioxide, water, and other wastes. Systems interact. When I took a bite out of this apple, that was one organism consuming another organism. That's an important kind of interaction. Living systems are also embedded within other systems. An apple tree, for example, is part of a wider ecosystem composed of interacting populations and the non-living matter and energy that sustain them. And all ecosystems are part of the biosphere, the living system that includes all life on Earth. How are you going to learn this? I'm not referring just to this video, but to the entire course. Learning requires interaction, and that's why I put together an interactive biology curriculum at my website, sciencemusicvideos.com. So go there now. You're going to find flashcards, you're going to find multiple choice quizzes, you'll find interactive diagrams, ways that you can interact to really remember what you've learned. Go there now. There's a card above, there's a link below. Complete the activities and you will learn more than you ever thought possible, and you'll have fun doing it because it's not passive learning, it's active. You'll have a great sense of accomplishment, so go do it. It does require a subscription. It's a great bargain, and you can also get your teacher to purchase the site license so that all the students in your class can be learning together. Got a question? Please leave it in the comments below. But right now, I'm going to sign off. I'll see you at sciencemusicvideos.com, and I'll see you here next week for the next episode of Thinking Biologically. Thanks.